Many of us, when getting an admission in college, are already a bit nervous. And what would make that more awkward, that you'd have to pose naked for photographs of yourself during the freshman orientation. Well, that is exactly what happened at Ivy League seven-sister school like Yale, Harvard, and more. These are reportedly almost 16 schools in total. During the late 1800s to the mid-1900s, Ron Rosenbaum, a Yale graduate, reports, "One fall afternoon in the mid-60s, shortly after I arrived in New Haven to begin my freshman year at Yale, I was summoned to that sooty Gothic shrine to muscular virtue known as Payne Whitney Gym. I reported to a windowless room on an upper floor where men dressed in crisp white garments instructed me to remove all my clothes. These were called posture photos. Thousands of pictures were taken of students, including such notable names such as George Bush, Diane Sawyer, Meryl Streep, and Hillary Rodham Clinton, which these universities told to check the rate and severity of rickets, scoliosis, and lordosis in the population, as they believed that bad posture would lead to health problems. Since taking these pictures was supposed to be for medical reasons and also because in those days same-sex nudity among students wasn't that weird. In some older schools around that time, they had communal showers and communal baths. You will get it by recalling the bathroom scene of the third Harry Potter movie where the creepy ghost starts stalking Harry. The YMCA and many public schools required nudity, so everyone could tell you were clean and promoted hygiene. Both of those were also phased out around the 60s, so it wasn't considered very weird aforetime, or you may say not in the early stages. However, things got a bit suspicious when in 1940, William Sheldon, a psychologist, was given access to these photos by these schools. For Sheldon, these pictures were an opportunity, and he started using them to investigate if there's a link between body shape and personality or intelligence. Mr. Sheldon used these photographs in his research for more than 20 years without students' consent. The research was stopped and shut down in 1970 for a lot of problems, as we will discuss further in the video. Today, we know that your body shape does not usually determine your personality. Before these studies stated in college, Sheldon was a very popular psychologist of his time. In the 1940s, he published 3 books about his research where he proposed that there are 3 genetically determined body types, or somatotypes. These were endomorphs, who were pear-shaped with a lot of body fat, especially around the stomach, which Mr. Sheldon named after part of the embryo that develops into internal organs. Then there were mesomorphs, who were muscular and lean, after the part of the embryo that becomes bone and muscle. And at last, the ectomorphs were skinny and long, after the part that becomes the skin and nervous system. Mr. Sheldon said that most people were a mix of each somatotype, and he would score people on a scale of 1 to 7 for each type based on their measurement. Like a 711 would be a pure endomorph, while a 444 would be average. Mr. Sheldon also suggested that there are 3 kinds of temperament that were each related to the different somatotypes. He thought endomorphs were relaxed and affectionate, and he called such personalities viscerotonic, while mesomorphs were active, aggressive, and dominant, which he called somatonic personalities. And lastly, ectomorphs were introverted, sensitive, and self-conscious, which he labeled cerebrotonic. This relationship between body type and personality became known as constitutional psychology, which became a trendy topic back then. Its obsession was similar like how many people today believe in horoscopes. Magazine companies published articles related to this constitutional psychology about what kind of body types their readers have. Mr. Sheldon had gathered some convincing evidence by photographing and observing the behavior of university students. This attracted other psychologists to the idea, which ultimately led Ivy League to give Mr. Sheldon access to the posture photos. Mr. Sheldon wasn't using biographies of the students, so the photos were mainly to improve Mr. Sheldon's evidence that somatotypes exist. In the span of 20 years, Mr. Sheldon collected thousands of photos, and in 1954, he published a book called The Atlas of Men, which contained hundreds of male, naked photos as examples of all somatotype. After a while, when Mr. Sheldon tried to make an atlas of women, this is where things started to wobble. In 1950, some of his female photos were displayed by the University of Washington, where one young woman saw them and told her parents. This was not a normal act to be ignored, so her parents mobilized a small army of lawyers to destroy many of Mr. Sheldon's female photographs. Meanwhile, Mr. Sheldon's former assistant, Barbara Honeyman, came out with a ton of critics of Mr. Sheldon's work. Barbara, with evidence, said Mr. Sheldon had tampered for the Atlas of Men. After World War II, people were especially nervous about linking physical features to personality and performance, since that was a little too similar to the whole Aryan master race agenda. Because of this, schools finally became wary of Mr. Sheldon. Apart from that, doctors realizing that posture wasn't as related to health as they thought, and schools decided to phase out posture photos during the 1960s and 1970s. Today, constitutional psychology has pretty much been debunked, and besides the consent issue, there were plenty of other problems with this research. For one thing, this was a little too subjective. Mr. Sheldon did a lot of the ratings himself, and since he knew what connection he was looking for, he probably skewed the results in his favor. Example, he observed 200 young men with a history of criminal activity and then wrote short biographies and took pictures of each of them. He noticed that most boys with aggressive personalities were mesomorphs, so he used that to support his hypothesis that mesomorphs are aggressive. Nevertheless, it's much more likely that violent crimes happen to be committed by muscular men, not that muscles automatically equal to aggression. This constitutional psychology just reinforced stereotypes, like the dominant jock or the nervous skinny kid. His research also didn't include that body shape can change with age. The researchers think the ultimate goal of Mr. Sheldon's work was to breed a superior race of humans by pairing up people based on somatotypes. We have always heard such rumors from biological departments that they are trying to build superhumans or choose the best egg or develop the fittest characters. No one ever supported such hypotheses, and hence, Sheldon's work is deemed unscientific. These days, we still use the concept of somatotypes for fitness reasons, but researchers have created a formula to figure them out, which we obviously know has nothing to do with personality. Nevertheless, we cannot deny that being in good shape makes you confident. It is not because of the body shape, but because your body itself is in a healthy state, giving you better reflexes, reaction time, and energy. Body shape is in no way going to determine goodness or evilness of your character. It just guarantees healthy and a better lifestyle. Coming back to the topic, to evaluate someone's temperament, today we use mind-based tests like the Big Five, which measures traits like extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. These people are more likely than average to be moody and to experience such feelings as anxiety, worry. We also know that personality can change over time, like someone might get less extroversion as they get older. So there's definitely no hard and fast rule to predict someone's personality based on their body shape. No matter how many naked pictures of college students you look at, maybe complete removal of clothing is necessary to determine posture, but not to determine personality type. Now, you might be wondering where these photos are now. What happened to them? Well, some remnants of the images were transferred to the Smithsonian, and most were destroyed between 1995 and 2001. Starting in 2020, hundreds of photos of male freshmen from Yale have gone up for sale individually on eBay, ensuring that many remain in private collections. At Yale, an enormous cache of nude photographs was discovered in a locked room by an unsuspecting university staff member many years later. Those ones were promptly burned. Another large collection was found gathering dust in dead storage in a Goodwill warehouse in Boston. When the New York Times broke the story, calling it the Great Ivy League Nude Posture Photo Scandal, Yale University immediately requested all photos of their students be shredded. The Smithsonian complied and offered to do the same for any other universities that requested it. The clandestine museum branch is not open to the public, only to researchers. And to this date, it has not been revealed how many or if any photographs still remain in existence. The mysterious nude photographs tradition of Harvard is interesting yet outdated. What are your perceptions about this matter? Share your opinions.